This next section is kind of a serendipitous moment where we have an opportunity to kind of highlight some interesting things. In our program here at UT Dallas, we have been studying the idea of how do organizations develop multiplier effects, meaning how do they get 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x when they deploy technology. And this has been something that has been a journey for me for about 6 years since I've had a few companies introduce this concept of getting 5x, 6x, and 10x performance numbers. So I've been bringing this into the classroom for quite some time. And while we've been able to identify external organizations who achieve extreme efficiency gains and productivity gains, the challenge has been, can we train salespeople to be multipliers? Can you train salespeople to where they perform at a exponential level or at a peak level? So it's kind of been a journey for us at UT Dallas. And I'd like to introduce a panel that I believe they will either tell their story or they won't. I'm gonna tell what I know, and then they can tell us whether they think if they're an exponential or a multiplier in their organization. We've invited 4 of our alumni who have graduated from the program within the last 2 years, which is where we kind of started morphing the curriculum within UTD and discussing multiplier effects, discussing modern technology, discussing iterative impact. And the following 4 students or alumni have achieved multiplier effects in their organization. So I'll start with Ashley Varela, who is with IBM. And last time I talked to Ashley, now she corrected me. So I'm going to give the early number. The reason I want her to talk to us is at one point she was at 700% of her quota. And then she corrected me, I think, and said she was even higher than that when I introduced her. And I know that she's very humble and doesn't like to brag about herself. So, but that was a phenomenal story to me. And I said, okay, well, wait a minute. Is this happening elsewhere? And Brian Hanks is with us. And Brian Hanks has back-to-back at Adobe been the #1 producer in Adobe, both as a rookie. So he was Rookie of the Year his first year. He just finished 2019 as the #1 SDR in all North America. Then we have Jordan Murphy, who's over at Qualtrics, who also finished out the last year as the #1 SDR at Qualtrics in all of North America. And then Mackenzie Glava is with Gartner. And Mackenzie was moved into an enterprise role as a youngin', as a rookie, and has immediately back-to-back hit president's level performance in an enterprise role coming pretty close out of the gate. So I guess I'd like to propose that maybe we have developed at least something in which collaboratively these people have figured out how to move forward in high performance levels. And so that's our panel today for the next 30 minutes. And I just want to start off with the question for each person. If you can answer in the way I introduced you, I'd like to say, what makes you effective as a modern seller? That's the first question. What makes you effective? Ashley?
Well, hello everybody, and Dr. Dober, thank you for that lovely introduction. So, I, was thinking about this from the time that you obviously gave us these questions, and, I think there's a lot of different components, right? But for me specifically, especially just like, today, and especially with everything that's going on, I feel like it's more emphasis on relationship building. And I like to think of it as like selling feelings, not solutions. So you're selling feelings. You're really understanding how you can help your customers simplify the process and not overly complicate things. So I'm constantly relationship building, and I am kind of in an account management position, so that's already kind of my focus. But I think it's even more important to even internally as well, building those relationships, and making it a simplified process for everybody. And then and secondly, I think today, there's an overload of structured and unstructured information, and it's good and bad, right? It's extremely overwhelming. There's so many tools and resources and databases out there to obtain information about your customer, but I think using big data to generate real insights and powerful insights, to customize your customer's experience, those are two different aspects that I think make me, a pretty effective, modern day seller.
Ryan.
Well, tough act to follow. I don't know if anybody will be able to compete with Ashley there, but I don't know. The way that I look at it, and for reference, I'm in an inside sales role. So I basically work with large enterprises across consumer packaged goods and retail. And my role now, I work deals underneath like roughly 250 grand per year. Anything larger than that, my enterprise reps work on. So when in my space, the way that I think about like how I'm effective is a lot of these companies that I'm working with are all like public companies, right? So there is a absurd amount of information out there that you can get to understand what their companies or what these customers are looking to do from a high level strategy, right? So I like to look at 10Ks. I listen to earnings calls. There's a ton of information on social media. Like my goal is to understand first, like what is the highest strategy, right? And then when I go to my customers and I go to my point of contacts, I would love for it to be the CMO, but it's likely more scenario of like a director or like a low level VP. And then I get their take on what the strategy is, right? So, or I'll like lead with that strategy and almost handle like a challenger sales motion and say, what's your take on it? And what are you doing? Or what is your department doing to like achieve those strategies, right? So everything that I'm working towards is all catered towards what their business is working on.
Jordan.
Hey everyone, always good to see you all. I was chronologically the last one to come to the program, so appreciate you guys letting me stand on the same platform as y'all, but always good to see you guys. And the main ideas I have as far as being effective are a little bit more conceptual. I work in the inside organization at Qualtrics, and so we're selling experience management software. So when you think about customer experience programs, employee experience programs, brand experience programs, that's my space. And so I cover the Southeast on enterprise organizations. So some consumer packaged goods, some overlay there that Brian was talking about too. So when I think about that area, something that can apply to across industry and across any discipline is the first one is really just being present in everything that you do. And so Dr. Dover, you were talking about, curiosity, and that's a constant theme you've had recently. I think that especially when you have young minds going into the first role to college and expanding beyond that, it can be tough to know how to be curious sometimes. So it's like, hey, what questions do I ask? How do I even get curious about this? What is this person going to care about? How do I sound intelligent in these conversations? I think the first step is really being observational. So it's whenever you get into a conversation, you're just sitting down and saying, hey, maybe I don't know what to ask. Maybe I don't know what's going to be most important, but I'm going to learn a ton during this conversation. Just constantly having that lever on and pulling everything you can from that. Because I think the natural stretch you get there is you're insanely observational, and then you learn how to be curious. You learn what questions to ask, and that will lead to thought leadership and saying, okay, here's where the experience came from. Here's what I've picked up. Here's what I should go recommend to my clients, my prospects, things like that. So that'll just improve your overall acumen, your EQ, and your IQ. It'll also help you feel just a lot more fulfilled if you live in these conversations as you're having. In an inside role, 7 months into a pandemic, it can be tough if we feel like we're just pushing pixels around all day. But if you make a concerted effort to, hey, I'm going to live in this conversation, I'm going to pick up so much beyond this, you'll just feel a lot more, fulfilled from that perspective. And the second one, I feel like a big gap that we have right now with young sellers in general is just being proactive and understanding, hey, I know I have a number monthly, quarterly, whatever that may be, and here's my list of accounts. But being proactive in what really am I offering? I know what the marketing pitch is and what our sales pitch is, but alluding to what Brian was saying too, hey, what do our clients, what do our prospects feel about it? How is it important to them? Let me talk like them instead of talking like a seller and a vendor. A little bit what Gardner was saying earlier. Let me be part of the buying process and be proactive in understanding what that means. And the last point I have here is what I think makes you effective is the idea of being interested and being interesting. So be interested in whatever you're selling. Be somewhere that you're passionate about what you're doing. You're saying, hey, looking at my company, looking at my offerings, this is cool. I like what we're doing. I like what's going on. I'm interested in how it's helping other people. And then being multidimensional, the other part, being interesting. Have things beyond Qualtrics or whatever else that you do in your life, because that'll make you a better seller yourself. You know, Mac is becoming the next Picasso. She's really good at painting and doing all that. So I'm sure that helps blend into everything else. And it just helps you feel re-energized. And it helps you, because I want everyone I ever talk to say, hey, I love talking to this kid because I learned something every time I talk to him. And he has a lot of life. He has a lot of heart in everything that he does. And so I think those are the three main areas. And again, they were being present, being proactive, and then the idea of being interested and being interesting is what I attribute to being effective.
Mackenzie?
Thanks for the Picasso shout out, Jordan. And thank you so much for inviting me to join this amazing panel of people who I have really looked up to for a long time. Obviously, some background on my specific role where I work at Gartner is I sit on a specific team called the Strategic Accounts team. And the clients that I work with that fall under that category are large enterprise clients in terms of their size and their revenue. But because I specifically work with IT, like chief information officers, their VP of enterprise architecture, infrastructure, operations, everything under that umbrella, the IT teams are rather small, more fit for mid-sized enterprise. So how I've kind of become an effective modern seller, not only kind of keeping in mind COVID-19 and the impact that that has had on a lot of my clients, is really acting as an extension of their team. I think a lot of what Ashley said really resonated with me in terms of the relationship building. First and foremost, coming from a place of knowing their business and showing that I did my homework to be a partner to them versus just someone that they can leverage for their, like, keep the lights on activities, but really prove the trust-based value add that I'm trying to bring to the relationship is really what establishes the best working partnership that I can have with them, and really builds on if they do end up needing any sort of expansion in their services or something additional, it's coming from a place of care and from insight on working together so closely. The only other really piece that I think that's really made me an effective modern seller is actually from a lot of what I think everybody on the panel has already touched on, which is really coming focused with a lot of customization. So Gartner obviously has a lot of different research and analysts that support our CIO clients and our IT leaders day in and out. So working not only with them, but with our executive partners to understand, hey, what are the challenges that are associated with X or Y or Z project, since my client's about to embark on that. So that when I come to the call, knowing that that's something they're about to start, I obviously have the ideas of knowing when, hey, you're probably going to expect this challenge 3 months down the road. Have you thought about that? And that's something that's typically insightful, gets them really excited about, no, it's not actually something I was thinking about, and really brings them the value of that I'm thinking longer term for them and being proactive and bringing that customized relationship and being more specific where I can be.
Thank you. So I'm gonna kind of pivot, and I'm gonna try to incorporate Cheryl's question in the pivot. Is to say, you know, what do you think differentiates you from the average seller? You're all very young in your careers, and you're accomplishing pretty amazing things. I mean, most of you are operating at not just a small margin in comparison to your peers. There's usually a pretty extensive differentiation. And as I've interviewed several of our alumni, I keep on hearing that story. So what do why do you think you're able to perform better than an average seller? And then carefully, because, you know, obviously your peers may hear this because you don't want to, but kind of again, you know, what's giving you a competitive advantage internally in the organization? And Cheryl wanted to know specifically around the onboarding, right? Yeah, but I mean, we know some things that Cheryl doesn't about. Maybe we were able to accelerate your onboarding because of what we did here. So I'll start with Ashley again. Can you kind of address, what do you think differentiates you?
Yeah. So first off, to kind of address Cheryl's question. So I work at IBM, and obviously IBM's onboarding program and summit program is phenomenal. And so I was very fortunate to be provided kind of like a 6-month mini MBA, if you will, of just sales information and role playing and all of that. So that's really helpful. You know, just to start off your career with. But in addition to that, I think what kind of differentiates me, if you will, is what I like to do is I like to understand kind of the full circle internally and externally. So what I mean is there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen where my business is. And so there's a lot of stakeholders that, are concerned about different deals and opportunities. And so I take value in understanding each stakeholder's position, what's in it for them, and what are they wanting, to bring to the table to help the customer, and what will benefit the customer. So really understanding how each kind of piece it plays in the overall picture, I think is really important, including the customer side as well. And then, like, aside from that, I'm a millennial, so I am huge with, like, culture to me is a big deal. And so at IBM, it's a pretty mature company. And so, I think just bringing that fresh, like, energy into the company, and bringing different ideas, whether it be business related or just culture and employee engagement related. I'm really big on that. So, I'll do different contests. Right now we're doing an OI bingo that I came up with that my BB loved. And so she's implemented that across her whole business unit, Canada and the US. And so just keeping your name out there, obviously for the good. You don't want to, have any bad things out there, but staying active, networking, keeping your name out there. I think that's so important, just for visibility purposes.
Okay, Brian, thoughts? What differentiates you? How are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things that I think about. I think the first one is that, again, kind of to my first point about when you challenge your customers, you have to understand, like, what their business is looking for. I think it's very easy when you get into the middle of the year to be so hyper focused on your quota and, like, the immediate, like, deals that are in front of you. So I think that you also, like, I kind of preach this thing where you have to have, like, both passive and, like, aggressive understanding of a company, right? And understanding what their goals are. So I set up notifications. I set up any kind of information that I can get on my customer, I will get, right? So if it's a presentation notes that gets sent to me right after it's done, right? Or if it's like Google alerts, the second that their company is mentioned in the news, I'm downloading that information in a passive way. So I'm always bringing things and understanding what's going on with the company. And I think too, once you get into that actual, like, buying, like, experience, is something to think about, right? Because we talk a lot about our customer experience, especially in the retail space. We want people to like, love our brand and understand it across from the time that you start thinking about the brand to the time that you actually make a purchase. Like, you want to be engaged and you want to be a personalized experience. I think the same thing has to happen whenever we're selling in B2B. And that's not something that we see a lot of, is that we have to make sure that our buyer's experience is something that they want and it's personalized, right? So whatever it is that they're thinking of and how can we make it, like, better for them, is something to be really important. And then the last thing is, like, a very, like, tactical one, which is, like, just negotiation. When you're getting into it, it's like always, if you're going to give something, make sure you're getting something back. And the more creative you can be, right? It's not necessarily going to be about price. A lot of times it's going to be, especially in software space, it's like pushing out dates. How can we get something else involved? If I give on this price, can you introduce me to somebody else inside your organization? Those types of things, right? So always just trying to be creative and try and stay away from price and get into other categories that are not monetary. And then the last thing I'll quickly add here is how did I ramp up? For me, it was you get a ton of like marketing content when you first start, right? Like this is what our products do. I think what's most important is understanding how your customers and prospects talk about your products and talk about their needs. So the number one tool that I used when I first got started on was Chorus. I would come in and I would listen to all of the current back conversations that prospects were having with our company to understand what pains we actually solve for.
Interesting. Jordan, what's your perspective?
Sure. I'll double tap the last thought that Brian had there with Chorus. I think that as the main point I have here, differentiator, goes to its two main topics, getting people talking, and I'll elaborate on that in a second. And the second one is, at fear of sounding like a Hallmark card, just having a whole lot of heart and having more heart than anybody else that you're going to be going up against. And so what Brian was saying as far as like, hey, listen to what's going on, listen to what's important. Whenever you're doing, self-development and you're going through a ramping period, or, you think about what everybody is getting, all the same materials, and it's like, okay, how do I take this a step further? And I think that's an important principle to think about as well, is when you're in the point where you're proving yourself, which I think is every day in a sales role, if you're given a task, say, hey, go do A, it's like, okay, let me go do A, and then be proactive thinking about how do I go do B, C, D, that's the order of the alphabet. And then, hey, by the way, here's how to do A better. And so listening to Chorus gives me an idea of saying like, hey, it's important to ask questions and debrief and learn from people by having a one-to-one conversation. But the best way you can do that and learn is to go see the best executors in there as they're doing it. So attach yourself to a rep that you are respectful of as far as like what they're doing, they're high performing, and just listen to how they interact and see what's important, see how they talk with their clients and prospects. Then after it's over, say, hey, can I ask you a couple questions? Why'd you do this? Why was this important? Did you think about that? Like just constantly peppering them and seeing them go do those things. And so I think, as going back to my first point of getting people talking, being able to navigate internally and the different channels that you have externally, your solution strategist, there's a huge support system, right? Hopefully you have an organization. If you can understand how to get everybody involved and say, hey, here's what I need to go do, and here's what I need to get to. How does that align with what you do? How can we get there together? That's really important, and having the whole army behind you of saying, hey, there's other people working to get all to the same spot that will help me get there. And then if you have different channels of people trying to sell what you're selling, it's saying, hey, let's compare notes. How can we work in different areas? Because it truly is, it's a team effort. And so you got to have an idea when you come into any role, where do I ultimately want to end up? Let me think beyond the scope of a monthly number, a quarterly number. And for me, that is, hey, using a sports analogy, hey, I want to be on the diamond with the best 9 players, playing against the best 9 players. And so I want to get to be an enterprise quota carrying rep. What steps can I do right now? And what I've been doing the past 18 months as an enterprise BDR to get to that point? How do I engage internally with the right people to discuss what that'll look like? How do I build my brand both internally and externally? And I think that if you chip into that every single day, the progress you can make in 12 months, 24 months is massive. And it's fun. I always tell people that the main reason I like to go into sales is I just like to talk to people. It's a blast. There's a lot of intrinsic motivation there. And that just goes into having simply just the most heart in the room and having a lot of that.
Mackenzie, what are your thoughts on what differentiates you?
I'll actually start with the ramp up question first, then I'll go into the differentiation piece, because at Gartner, the ramp up process also is pretty long. It's very similar to IBM, and the fact that I think I had my first day in February, then we went through like the formal sales training on like the product, the materials, different things like that. And I was done by April, and then they had this kind of shadow program. So obviously they had backfill, and while we were waiting to actually get our position on the floor, we shadowed teams, understood the role, and then we went live. I went live after a month and a half. the biggest thing that really helps my like ramp up process, though, so to speak, is we have a mentorship program. So as you are new to the sales floor, Gartner or your manager more specifically actually finds someone who's been very, very successful. And after they get to know you a little bit, understand a bit how you work, how you sell, your personality, they align someone very similar. And I do not think I would have been as successful as I have been without the mentors that I've had. I've had two now, and both have been incredibly impactful for my ability to actually see and understand like the details that are kind of overlooked when just doing the formalized training. In terms of how I believe I've differentiated myself and my peers, though, more specifically, is really two things. And the first one being the fact that they're like the challenger method. So that is something where, again, I think I mentioned this earlier, leveraging the experts that we have, just placing 15 minutes on their calendar and, you know, spending that time saying, hi, Mr. Analyst or Miss Analyst, like I have a client who's about to embark on a 22-year-old ERP refresh. Like this is something they need to do. What do they need to expect? What are the different key pieces? What are the challenges associated? And why is that going to be painful for them specifically? And then they would actually help me create what is like more of a formalized engagement plan. So I would be bringing that to them, which is something that like normally how we interact with our clients is just sending a research note here or there in support of what they need help on. But I kind of put together these really more formalized plans, and I'm sending that proactively, and it's just kind of going the extra mile. Really, the only other thing outside of that I think has been pretty unique to me is business case creation. So I think a lot of what I've seen, not only just at Gartner, just I think anywhere, is now it's you make your business case and then you present it. But by establishing those relationships first and foremost and building on that prior to even thinking about sales, is that after there is that opportunity to upsell, it kind of becomes collaborative. You know, I bring the opportunity to them, we talk about it, and then we're working on the same side of the table to actually create that business case. And it becomes so much more successful because we're working together, because we both see the value and the alignment of either the service or whatever it is that is the proposal. But those are the two things that I would say have been really effective.
Well, I want to kind of do a rapid fire. I know we're at the end of time if people need to kind of take a break, but my last question is, and I think this is for the executives and the enablement people on this call, their goal is to create you. Their desire is to hire you and create you. How do we create you? In 30 seconds, I know this is a bonus question, so I'm going to go with Jordan first, just because I think I can throw something at Jordan. Then I'll go to Ashley, Brian, and then Mackenzie, okay? How can we create you?
I think that the first point of being insanely observational and the concept of drilling home, of saying there's a lot of raw talent right now, so call a spade, and saying you won't know everything you need to ask or everything you need to look for, everything you need to understand. But as long as you're just saying, okay, I know that I'm in an important period of my life, or I'm in an important time in my development, let me just be insanely present and learn everything and work really hard at what I learn, because I might not end up at, you know, the next tier of, let's say, this inside sales dev org. But as long as I become insanely observational, I'll know what's out there and I know what to do. And if I work hard, I'll have options open up for me, and I'll have a lot of conviction with my next decision to make, because I've been insanely observational and I'm just present. I'm really here. And so I think drilling that point home of saying, hey, if I'm in the UT sales program, if I'm in any organization in the first year at a college, let me be here. Let me get a really good understanding of what's going on. If I like it, cool, let's move forward. If there's other options to go, it's just, as long as you work hard and constantly are present in the moment, doors will open for you no matter what direction it will be. And most of the time it won't be where you thought it was going to be originally.
Okay, Ashley.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with Jordan. I think there's so much talent, you know, at UTD Sales, or everywhere. And I think it's important to any organization to understand, you know, what motivates individuals. I think that's very important to, that individual's success. In addition, I think for executives in organizations, I think it's important to give individuals or new hires opportunities to actually add value. I know, just kind of reflecting on a specific experience, you know, back in my summit days, which was so long ago, you know, there were some managers that were a little hesitant to actually involve a summit in an opportunity, or to, you know, let them add their own value. And so I think it's important to do that, because it gives us the confidence, and it also allows us to showcase and add value that from a different perspective. So I think that would be my input.
Okay, so we're gonna go with Brian.
Cool. I'll quickly add something that I have to drop here, but I think the best thing that like my company has done that's kept me super motivated throughout this time before I can be like a true like enterprise seller is they've broken this up into your first role, and then you're a senior on that role, and then you move into the next role, and then you're a senior on that role. So I'm always having something to pace towards, and it's keeping me motivated, right? So people who are super like career motivated and want to get to whatever that is, like breaking it up and having me like achieve something. For some reason, it makes me actually okay with being in that seat longer if I feel like I'm actually pacing towards something all along the way. Even if it's as something as simple as moving you into like your BDR, and then you're a senior BDR, and you throw a couple more, I don't know, increase the OTE by a little bit, and that helps me stay motivated the whole time. It's just always working towards something.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
And Kinsey, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think obviously, and I'm kind of reading the chat at the same time, is obviously I know that there is a lot of top talent already, but I think the reason why Gartner has been the place where I've been able to flourish is really just that I'm passionate about what they do. I think the ability to find such an impact in supporting these people's projects that they really couldn't do without us, and seeing a difference and getting them that promotion they were wanting, or like seeing them be really successful on a project that they actually get a seat at the table with their other C-suite members. To me, that's what makes me so excited to be working at the job that I so thankfully and luckily have. But really, that's been what's been the reason why I've been able to be so successful here.
Okay, well, we're kind of a few minutes in to a break, and each of these panels, each of these people have agreed very graciously at the last minute to kind of jump in because we had a different panel. So I definitely want to respect their time. We're in a break for about 20 minutes. They may or may not have time to just stay and chat and answer questions. So thank you very much.